Hi, I'm Shannon Baker and this is Smash Course U.S. History. Today we're going to talk about the decade of 1930 to 1940, which, yes, includes the greatest event in the history of our nation, the Great Depression, which was accurately named in terms of size, but somehow still seems misleading. The 5 key points that we'll discuss today include number 1, the aforementioned Great Depression, number 2, FDR and his New Deal, number 3, the Dust Bowl, number 4, Depression-era culture, and number 5, the Roosevelt recession. This is a lot to cover in such a short time, so I've installed mild punishment for those of you who think you're just too cool to listen. That's right, get caught not paying attention and you get to sit in the corner wearing the cone of shame. That brings back memories. If there's one thing you should remember about the Great Depression, it's this. The Great Depression was not purely a result of the stock market crash that began on Black Tuesday. There were several other factors that contributed to the start of the worst depression in American history. These included workers and consumers receiving too small share of the labor productivity increases, overproduction in the industries, and the unequal distribution of income and wealth. Oh, hey, me from the past, do you have a question?
Actually a comment. I'm betting the government cooked up a brilliant scheme to aid the people.
You think so? You know what I say to that? You're wrong! Wrong, me from the past! Ha! Okay. The government under Hoover didn't so much as cook up a brilliant scheme as it was more of a poorly concocted jumble of hash. Regardless, Herbert Hoover is our first important person, so we're gonna go ahead and welcome Grace.
Can I talk, please?
No!
You mean everyone loved Hoover? Yeah, I'm not actually gonna say that. No one really liked Hoover. He was not a very interesting guy. The only thing he did was he created the RFC, which is the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, in 1932, but the problem was not in supply, it was in demand. Hoover was not responsive to any human thing, especially, we can see this in the Bonus Army March in spring of 1932, where World War I veterans gathered in Washington demanding early payment of their bonds that they got, which actually weren't going to be put in until 1945. But Hoover had moved out by General Douglas MacArthur, and basically the stamp on Hoover's administration saying, "Hello America, meet failure," and doomed the 1932 election for Herbert Hoover. He would not get it back.
So if Hoover wasn't going to do anything worthwhile, who was? The answer to that question arrived in the form of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who proposed his New Deal for the American people. The New Deal was a policy of reform, relief, and recovery. But before we address this policy, let's hop back on over to Grace for our second most important person.
I'll talk about FDR.
Spoiler alert! No. Just for that, just no. Be patient. Your time is coming, Grasshopper.
Our second most important person is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And before being the president, he was the governor of New York, and he had his eye on the White House for the entire time. While he was going for the White House, he assembled key advisors who we called the Brain Trust. The Brain Trust was a bunch of really smart people, such as our entire APUSH class, besides me. So, once elected, FDR immediately declared the next 4 days as a bank holiday, which was super cool because then the government was able to go through and be like, "No bank, you're not good. Yes, bank, you are good." On March 12th, FDR did his first fireside chat, which is a lot like Crash Course, where they discussed really complicated things with very non-complicated people, so everyone could understand it. And now we're on to our third most important person, and I do not understand why she is the third most important person, because she is awesome. And that would be Eleanor Roosevelt, because Eleanor Roosevelt was amazing. She, first of all, had great influence on her husband, and Eleanor Roosevelt was a supporter of protective legislation for women, lobbied FDR privately, testified before legislative committees, and even wrote a newspaper column.
Sometimes I wish I was that cool. Anyways, FDR's New Deal had several aspects to it, and because historians lack creativity, we call them the First New Deal and the Second New Deal.
Ooh, can we get a rapid fire listing of acronyms from the First New Deal, please?
All right, here we go. The CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps. Young men were recruited to build public parks and structures across the nation in a military-like program, because nothing builds a nation's character like manual labor. The AAA, Agricultural Adjustment Administration, this gave federal aid to farms, helped set prices, and gave benefits to farmers who reduced their acreage. Tenant farmers and sharecroppers, the large number of these African Americans, did not receive the benefits of this legislation. The cherry on top of this delicious sundae of a program was the fact that it was declared unconstitutional in the 1936 Butler versus U.S. court case. And in the vein of delicious treats, thank you to Ruth Wakefield of Toll House and your inadequately stocked kitchen for bringing us these scrumptiously chocolatey cookies in 1933. Not a cookie. The TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, federally controlled program designed to bring electricity to an underdeveloped region in Tennessee. Critics called it socialism. The NIRA, National Industry Recovery Act. Theoretically, each industry would be self-governed by code created by businesses, labor, and consumer representatives. However, these codes were often written only by the largest industries, so small businesses got the short end of the stick in that legislation. Because all great things must come to an end, the NIRA was declared unconstitutional in 1935. The FERA, Federal Emergency Relief Administration. Half of the allotted $500 million went as direct relief to the states, while the rest was given on the basis for every $3 of state aid, the government would give $1. Direct federal grants was a system different than former President Herbert Hoover's system. A chicken in every pot? No. The FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. After the stock market crash on October 29th, many people's life savings were lost forever. The FDIC ensured people's money in the banks was safe. The WPA, Works Progress Administration. Under Harry Hopkins, this program employed more than 8 million Americans on a great variety of construction projects. Community service projects employed many jobless artists, musicians, actors, and writers as well. I really should work out more. But that is the First New Deal in a nutshell. There was also a Second New Deal with slightly leftist leanings, but for that, we're gonna have to welcome my good friend, Morgan. What's shakin' bacon?
So the Second New Deal. It concentrated more on social reform, so that FDR could keep the support among workers, farmers, and the elderly. First, he established the SSA, the Social Security Act. This created federally funded old age pensions and unemployed insurance. The Wagner Act, also known as the Magna Carta for labor. The Wagner Act led to union growth, especially in previously unorganized industries, like automobile, steel, and textile. And it set the stage for a sit-down strike in Flint, and the environmental acceptance of the union labor in General Motor factories. The RA, also known as the Resettlement Administration, helped relocate distant farm families to areas that would yield more productivity. It also took on reforestation and soil erosion projects, especially in the Southwest. This program was championed by Rexford G. Tugwell, which, side note, is pretty much the coolest name ever other than Crazy Horse. Of course, not everyone agreed with FDR's policies, but to learn that, we must go back to Grace.
Our fourth, fifth, and sixth important people are critics of FDR. Father Charles E. Coughlin, Francis Townsend, and Huey Long, or Kingfish. Father Charles E. Coughlin was a radio priest who originally agreed with FDR, but then after FDR did not allow him to influence national politics through a personal friendship, did a striking 180 and began calling him a dictator and a communist, and found the National Union for Social Justice. Sorry, McCarthy, he beat you to it. Francis Townsend was a California priest who called loudly for an old age pensions and later the Social Security Act. Gotta protect our old people, who else are gonna make us cookies when we're sad. Huey Long was a Louisiana senator, and he came up with the Share Our Wealth program, which is main focus on the wealth disparity in the country. People liked his "Every Man a King" slogan so much that he would have been a powerful challenge to FDR in the 1936 election. Well, if he hadn't been assassinated in 1935, yeah, tough luck. But on a cheerful note, back to you, Shannon. Got any happier news for us?
It's politics, Grace. It's rarely happy. So, FDR was not popular with everybody, but that's better than being Hoover. However, the Democratic Party drew in millions of new voters through his New Deal, and this group of people became known as the New Deal Coalition, which consisted of traditional-minded white Southern Democrats, big city political machines, industrial workers of all races, trade unionists, and many Depression-hit farmers. which seems like pretty much everybody, but there were still American businessmen that disagreed with his policies. So close, FDR. So close. And yet, still so far. So, we've touched on the Great Depression and the New Deal. What could possibly be next? To the Western farmers, the Great Depression was the end of agricultural prosperity brought about by World War I. Nothing worse could happen, right?
I'm gonna guess no.
That's right, me from the past, you're smarting up. The sad fact was, problems were far from over. As a result of stripping the landscape of its natural vegetation for years and years, violent dust storms arose around Kansas, eastern Colorado, western Oklahoma, the Texas Panhandle, and eastern New Mexico. This caused huge economic losses, and it wasn't so easy on the lungs either. The SCS, or Soil Conservation Service, set up demonstrations and offered supplies and technical assistance to the hardest hit farmers.
Ding,
And-
ding, ding.
What's that? Oh, it seems like it's time for...
Oh, it's time for the enigmatic article already? The rules here are simple. I try to guess the author of the mystery document, or I get soaked. The cars of the migrant people crawled out of the side roads onto the great cross-country highway, and they took the migrant way to the west. In the daylight, they scuttled like bugs to the westward, and as the dark caught them, they clustered like bugs near to shelter and to water. And because they were lonely and perplexed, because they had all come from a place of sadness and worry and defeat, and because they were all going to a new mysterious place, they huddled together. So these people are traveling, they're homeless, and they're poor. Poor people traveling during the Depression era are most likely Okies, small farmers from Oklahoma and Texas, going to California to look for work after their farming lands were defaulted on. A book about Okies from the Depression era is probably Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. And yes, it is! I'm not getting soaked today, ha!
Despite all the depression of the time, the American people still found a way to form a new culture. But even that was influenced by the Great Depression, the event of the 30s that seemed to influence all aspects of American life. And this brings us to our fourth key point, Depression-era culture.
So do I get to talk, or...?
All right, you can talk about Depression-era culture, but I'll be judging.
Yes, so Depression-era culture. This is intense. By 1932, the labor movement was nearly dead, but dramatic successes in organizing workers in mass production industries, like the auto industry, was key in labor union upsurge. The Congress of Industrial Organization, or CIO, was an alliance of industrial unions that centered mainly around organizing these mass production industries. The CIO used the popular tactic of sit-down strikes, made advances in rubber, steel, and electrical industries. Communists played a leading role in organizing CIO drives to boost membership. The 1930s also became the swing era, a time of jazz music became popularized.
Respect! That was not too shabby. But if you try to take my job, I swear
We're still filming!
So, our last key point deals with what today is known as the Roosevelt recession. FDR did not always have good relations with Congress. FDR wanted to have friendlier judges, so he asked Congress to pass a law that would expand the number of justices from 9 to 15 and allow the president to appoint new justices once the current justices reached the age of 70. The opposition to this court-packing bill was strong. In short, the bill was never passed, but the constitutionality of other New Deal decisions like the SSA was upheld, and FDR's relations with Congress took a nosedive. Grace likes recess, so we're gonna let her finish up the Roosevelt recessions talk.
All right, let's finish this recess. So, as you can see by this graph, stock market on the y-axis, and then the years on the x-axis. Normal 1930s, it was basically low, but by 1937, it had bounced back just a little bit. But FDR was still cautious about incurring huge national debt and called for a reduction in federal spending. Officials in the Federal Reserve System became worried about inflation and tightened their belts on credit policy. With a nasty hint of deja vu, the stock market collapsed in August of 1937. Prices went up, jobs went down. FDR blamed businessmen, saying that they had refused to invest because they wanted to hurt the president's reputation. Cough, cough, not everything is about you, FDR. The reform craze of the New Deal was over.
A moment of silence, please, to remember the New Deal. So, to recap, the Great Depression was caused by unemployment, overproduction, and unequal distribution of wealth. Herbert Hoover, the president during the 1929 stock market crash, failed to aid the American people through his RFC, and this helped FDR get elected in 1932. FDR and his New Deal brought about recovery, reform, and relief through various economic and social improvement programs, but even the New Deal couldn't do everything. The Dust Bowl was an added plight for Western farmers in the form of dust storms, but the SES worked to mitigate its effects. By 1937, the nation had not fully recovered, FDR's court-packing bill did nothing to help his relation with Congress, and the Roosevelt recession ended the New Deal reform era. Despite the hardship of the time, jazz, TV, and radio shaped a new Depression-era culture for the American people. That's all the time we have today. Remember, hand sanitizer is not 100% effective. Deer will get angry and charge, and just because someone promises you a chicken in every pot does not guarantee you the poultry. Thanks again for watching Smash Course U.S. History. We'll see you next time.
Are you sick of doing nothing to study for the AP exam?
Yeah.
Is it boring and not helpful to do it by yourself?
Yeah.
Then join a study group today. Get your friends to help you study. Do it with your friends. Do it with your enemies. Do it with that one person that you never talk to. And you can do it in a variety of places. At the mall, at home, on a plane, in the woods.
Benefits to a study group. You can hear others' contributions. Maybe you didn't think of something someone else thought of. Also, in a group, it's sometimes easier to make connections between current and past events. As a student, I took part in a study group every morning before each test, and it did wonders for me. My friend and I read over our notes, made a list of important terms and people, and asked each other questions before the test. It really worked. Each of us got higher scores on the test after studying together.
Side effects may include plenty of learning, better scores on test, fun, and jealous looks from all the kids who wish they were as bright as you. So don't wait and don't hesitate. Join a study group today!
Patented by Niagara Patenting Company.